Hello, and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, counselor, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. We pray that you will be encouraged by this podcast. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Today, I'm bringing you Allie Marie Smith. She is the founder and director of Wonderfully Made, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping teen girls and young women know their true value. She is an award-winning author, speaker, podcast host, and certified life coach. She lives in North Santa Barbara County, where she loves surfing and adventuring up and down the California coast with her husband, Paul, and golden retriever, Gidget. Allie, welcome.
Thank you, Rachael. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to say also, thank you for so bravely sharing your story and inspiring people to really persevere and overcome their circumstances.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. It sounds like we are resilience buddies in that and continuing to overcome and to share the hope that we have with other people.
Absolutely.
So you and I are going to talk today about your story, and we're going to talk about depression and suicidal ideation and what does health and healing look like and some of the things that lead into that. So let's just start with hearing your story.
Sure. I grew up in the Bay Area of California, and, I always say I was a really good girl from a good home, and I felt loved and just had a world of opportunity. As a girl, I was really feisty and confident. I was a tomboy with missing front teeth, and my cheeks would turn tomato red, from playing hours of soccer. And I had just great girl confidence, and I just was grateful for everything. I always believed in God from the time I was a little girl. I always believed that there was a creator who loved me, though I kind of felt this distance from God. And my confidence and my feistiness really began to fade around the age of 12. I started to experience unexplained feelings of unworthiness, insecurity, loneliness, shame. And looking back, I see that it was really the onset of clinical depression. And that really escalated throughout high school. On the outside, it looked like I was a girl who had things together. I was a straight A student. I was dating the captain of the football team at the all boys school. I was accepted by my friends. I had a smile on my face. But throughout high school, I really began to kind of fall apart inside. And every day became a battle. It was difficult to get through each day. I remember one Friday night after driving home from a football party, I just remember thinking what it would be like to crash my car onto the off-ramp. And what happened was this depression really began to escalate. And 2 weeks after I graduated, summa cum laude with a smile stretched across my freckled face, I found myself in a very deep and a very dark and a very debilitating depression, unable to eat, sleep, or talk. And my body was alive, but Rachael, there was no life within me. There was no hope. And the only thing I could think about was ending my life and ending the pain. And I was admitted by my parents to the psychiatric hospital. I was put on antidepressants and sent home 3 days later after promising the psychiatrist that I wouldn't hurt myself. And of course, all I could think about was getting out and out of there and just trying to end it all. And
so you were manipulating that system so that you could get out of there to take your life.
Yeah. And that summer, while my friends were going to parties and, decorating their dorm room and getting ready for college, I was in group outpatient therapy with many adults. I was 18 at the time. And what made it difficult was I saw that they had a reason to be depressed. And I didn't understand because I had everything a girl could want. I didn't I didn't have a reason. And now I know mental illness doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't
Mm-mm.
need a reason. And it's something that is run in my family. On a gloomy June day that summer of 2001, I grabbed my car keys and I headed out of our home in Silicon Valley with one destination in mind. And that was the Golden Gate Bridge, with the intention to end my life by jumping off. And I was really close to that bridge. I was driving somewhat recklessly. My tire hit a curb and I got a flat tire. I
Hmm.
just remember sitting in that car, just not sure what to do, didn't know what to do. And suddenly there was a knock on my window. And this silver-haired, kind-hearted man stepped out of his older white Mercedes Benz and asked if he could call for roadside assistance for me. And I said yes. And as we were waiting for AAA to come, I engaged in a real conversation with that man after not talking to anyone probably for a month or two.
Wow.
And that interaction gave me the hope I needed to go back to my family. And so my tire was fixed. I headed home. That was not the end of my mental health struggles. I tried to go to college on the East Coast after a therapist who gave bad advice to my parents said I needed to get on with my life. I needed to start college, and about 3,000 miles away from home. I was overwhelmed. I stopped taking my medication. I entered into a very dark, scarier place than before. My dad had to fly out and really rescue me. And I was readmitted to the hospital September of 2001 and was there for 3 weeks. I even watched the Twin Tower attacks from the hospital of the TV room, and I was so confused. And I didn't, I thought somehow I had caused these bad things, and
Hmm.
I was in a terrible place, and I was as broken as a girl could be. Christians in my parents' life began praying for me. One man gave me a very beautiful prayer, and as I was being treated with medication, the depression started to lift, and I was getting more clarity of thought, and I asked for a Bible. And I started reading it for the first time in my life. And as I read through the Gospels, I discovered that Jesus loved the broken and came to offer them hope and belonging and love. And one day, through a whispered prayer in the hospital chapel, as a woman sang Amazing Grace, I surrendered my life to Christ. And Rachel, I've never been the same since. I'll be
Wow.
honest with you and your listeners, I have battled mental health issues since. Um, but by God's grace, today I am on the other side. I am thriving, even with a mental health diagnosis. And I just hope that my story can give, especially girls and young women, but really anyone who has mental health struggles, hope that through professional help and faith and prayer, um, God can see you through, and that your struggle is not the end of the story.
That's so good. Thank you, Allie. Thank you for taking us through those pieces of your testimony. I'd love to go back and kind of pick through your story a little bit for some of the gems in there. So let's talk about how, you hit puberty kind of in that 12-year-old zone, and your brain chemistry started to shift and experience depression. It sounds like you were pretty good at performance and the appearance of perfection, and that you had a pretty good, game face, school face, doing all the right things, making it look like you were happy. What was happening, in your private space when you were home alone, when no one was watching?
Well, I believe that mental health challenges are very complex and there are many, many layers. I liken it to an onion. with all
Mm-hmm.
these layers. And there's the spiritual layer, of course. We have an enemy that's come to steal, kill, and destroy. We have our brain physiology. We have circumstances. We have our relationships. We have stressors. We have our personal. So all these things are interconnected. And I think for me, it was kind of the perfect storm. A family history of mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
being a highly perfectionist performer, a spiritual battle, hormonal issues, puberty. So much was going on. But back to your question of what it was like really inside is I was my own worst enemy and was filled with self-deprecating and negative and critical thoughts and clothed in shame, debilitating shame. The narrative in my mind was so cruel and harsh on myself.
I was wondering what your self-talk looked like.
I remember just thinking, oh, I'm such a mess. I would just say that over and over. I'm such a mess. I'm such a mess. And I'm not worthy of going to college. The world is better off without me in it. And these were the lies. And of course, depression is a liar. But like I said, we also have an enemy of our souls who lies to us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
In the first person, right? Thoughts that we hear in our
absolutely.
mind that imitate our thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So it was, appearances were deceiving. They were very deceiving. My parents didn't know the degree that I was struggling. My friends didn't know about the internal battle. I think there were signs and there were symptoms, but I did hide it well.
So one of the things that you're passionate about is the connection between social media, smartphones, and depression, body image, those kind of things. But that was kind of before. Did you have a smartphone at that time?
No, I didn't. There was no social media. Smartphones had not yet been on the market. I think I got my first phone my junior year, and I was, I
Mm-hmm.
don't even think you could send text
Yeah, that little
messages.
T9, like beep, 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 A, beep, 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 J. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And we did have instant messenger. And I think that was like the closest thing to kind of like social media. And I would go on instant messenger, AOL instant messenger, and I would get so much anxiety being on
hmm.
there. And I can't even imagine what my experience through high school would have been like if I did have social media. I think it would have been so devastating for me.
So let's give your parents a magic wand if we can go back in time. And let's say that they did know that you were struggling. Are you able, with retrospect, to look back and see earlier interventions, things that would have helped you, conversations you could have had?
Sure, yeah. I have wonderful parents, and they have been my number one supporters through this journey with me. And like most parents, they did the best that they could with what they had. And I think just really checking in maybe a little bit more and really digging beneath the surface level of, oh, I'm fine. Like, how are you really? Like, what are the governing thoughts of your mind? What thoughts are you thinking? What are you feeling? I did grow up in a high achieving home and was as I said, a perfectionist. And so I did hide behind a smile that said I was fine, that everything was fine when it wasn't. And I think having more space to be my authentic self and to come with my messy emotions and feelings and
Mm.
thoughts and know that those are welcomed at the table too. So I didn't have to stuff them, because I stuffed and it just made me ultimately just come apart. And so I think that would have been helpful. I think it was my junior year. My mom did decide she wanted me to go into counseling. And so I saw this older male therapist, and he was used to, working with kids that didn't necessarily have mental illness, but were dealing with maybe parents that were going through divorce. And he didn't understand mental illness. I remember him saying, I don't understand why someone who is so depressed, why they wouldn't just pick up their life and move somewhere new and start all over again. So
I'm
he did
sorry.
not understand what I was going through.
No, he
And
didn't.
he gave my parents bad advice, and I stopped seeing him. So I think, maybe researching, for any parents out there, really researching reviews of a therapist, making sure they really understand, ideally a counselor who has a biblical worldview, but is also educated on the reality of mental illness and the physiology of it. I think that would have been beneficial if I had seen a counselor who recognized I was dealing with mental illness and it wasn't my fault, and I needed
Mm-hmm.
treatment, and unfortunately I didn't get it. And so it led me to where the place that I ended up being.
I think what you're saying now really lifts that veil of shame off of asking for help, of saying, I'm not okay. I think I really resonate with the piece of mental illness that is the chemical makeup of our brain. And that if we are people who hormonally, if we create less serotonin or less dopamine or any of the many like neurochemicals in our brain, when you run out, you run out. You use it up. It is recreated, and there are those foundational building blocks within the body. But if you're low on it and you're using up more because you're struggling with anxiety or high stress, things like that, that consume those chemicals, there's nothing that you can think differently, pray differently, live differently per se. I mean, diet has a huge part to play in the gut and the health, and we secrete serotonin in the gut, things like that. But at some point, we just need that external support. And what you're saying is, I think, really validating for lifting that stigma off of mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, mental illness is really a brain health issue. A part of it is how our brain is functioning, and you said it exactly. About the chemistry of our brain. So, if we can get our brains healthy through changing the way that we think, renewing our mind, being transformed by the renewing of our mind, medication when needed, being intentional about how we self-care and manage the foods. There is so much hope. And mental illness, thankfully, it's not a terminal illness. Very often it can be highly treatable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people that are living with serious mental health diagnoses and are thriving in their lives. And so I think that had I had the right tools as a high school girl, you know, biblical counseling, medication, cognitive behavior therapy, renewing my mind, a relationship with Christ that gave me my true identity and true worth and purpose, I think I would have been better off.
Mm-hmm.
But God hasn't wasted any of the pain that I've been through. And, I would do it all over again, because it is ultimately what led me to my relationship with Jesus and has transformed my life and my character and given me my calling and my purpose. And so I am so grateful, as difficult as this journey has been, not only as a teenage girl, but a woman in my 20s and even in my early 30s. So it has not been an easy journey, but you know what? Your theme of your podcast is resilience. And when we have Christ in our lives, we can have that resilience to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he promises that if we surrender and submit our story to him, that he will work it to good. And I don't ever want to use that. I call them scripture band-aids, where it's like, instead of sitting with you and holding space for you, somebody kind of smacks you with a Bible verse, like, he works everything together for good for those who love the Lord in
Sure.
Christ Jesus. And it's almost like a shutdown, like, you should have better answers for this, or better faith, or I know people who've told my friend that her mom died of cancer because their faith was too poor to pray her into health, and
Mm-hmm.
we hate stories like that, but that's actually pretty common within a lot of the Christian community, and that toxic positivity, not opening up the space to share when we're hurting with safe people. And so I love that the Lord continues to redeem your story and that you're allowing him to do that, and simultaneously acknowledging like what a hard road it's been to get to the place where you can offer the treasures of darkness, right? You can offer the gems and the pearls of wisdom that you've gained because you've stayed faithful to this process. I wanted to ask you about that conversation that you had with that man on the bridge waiting for AAA. Looking back, why that timing? Why that man? Did he ask you leading questions? Were you just like ready to pour out your soul? How did he react to that?
Well, what was really interesting is I had an older brother who was 4 years older than me, and he was a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy. And I remember this man's white vintage Mercedes Benz pulling in front of my Ford Explorer, and there was a single bumper sticker, and it said Navy. And
Hmm.
so when he came and asked if he could help me and call for roadside assistance, I remember seeing his bumper sticker and I said, "Oh, like tell me about your experience with why do you have this Navy bumper sticker?" And that question really just was like surprised me because like I said, I was basically mute for 6 weeks, 2 months,
Wow.
and hadn't really engaged in any conversations with anyone. And so I think it was just God working in me. And I asked him that question. We had a conversation, we connected. And I remember thinking, maybe I'm going to be okay. Maybe this idea to end it all is wrong.
Hmm.
And so that's really how I connected with him. I mean, it's amazing looking back, and I still get emotional telling this story because I know it's just God's grace that intervened in my
Hmm.
life
Yes.
and sent this man. And maybe it was an, I don't know, angel, or he sent this man and used him powerfully in my life. And we never know the impact our kindness, our empathy, holding space for people, our encounters with strangers, we never know the effect that they can have on a single life.
So did you tell him you were like driving to the Golden Gate Bridge to jump off, or just his
No.
intervention in that space was enough to shift your mindset?
Yeah, I did not tell him. He had no idea.
Okay.
I didn't tell anyone what my plans were, but after my tire was fixed, I knew I was supposed to head home. And like I
Hmm.
said, it wasn't the end of my battles,
Right.
but God used that divine encounter to really rescue me from my terrible plan.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that was definitely the Lord's intervention on your behalf, especially, I'm imagining, this guy holding your hand as you're on the other side of the bridge or something and convincing you to climb back over, but it was enough. His presence and his comfort and his sounds like a very protective presence too, to
Mm.
notice that you were down on the side of the road, and what did it look like to step into your story, to inconvenience his day? Like you said, what does that look like? We never know the impact that our comment or our presence or a very simple gesture will do for a stranger to make them feel that they are not alone.
Yeah, I wish I could have coffee with him and just
Mm.
tell him thank you.
Well, gentlemen on the side of the road about 20 years ago, if you're listening to this, Allie had a life-changing experience with you. I would absolutely love to see a follow-up conversation, and what his thoughts would be if he knew how he had been used. And I think that that's such a beautiful perspective for heaven, that we're going to get to have the big picture view and go back and look and the Lord can show us like, hey, this is how I used your life, and this is how I used your life. And, don't minimize simple things. I think that that's a really beautiful takeaway for people who can be intimidated to help, or my presence doesn't matter, or, I'm not doing enough. I can't tell you how many people, when my husband passed, would say, oh, I just wish I could do more. I'm sorry it's so little. I'm sorry it's so little. And I know that they were saying, I wish I could take this for you. I wish I could fix it. I wish I could give you the massive gesture. But sometimes even just flowers delivered to my door on the right day just reminded me that I wasn't suffering or struggling by myself. And that gave me the hope to do one more day, because I really resonate with what you're saying, that in those dark places that suicide seemed like a solution, right? It seemed like an out, like this pain was not going to end and I was going to live with it forever. And I like the phrase that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And if you're able to get the help that you need and get your brain chemistry balanced and bring the right support into your life, it's not an unfixable situation. And I think especially at 18, right, your prefrontal cortex was not developed. You didn't have that ability to extrapolate out like, oh, I could get help, or maybe my therapist really did suck and it wasn't just me, and somebody else might be actually able to intervene in a meaningful way for me. So I'm really looking forward to digging in deeper into your story in part 2. If you would join me for that, Allie, next week.
I would be so honored to.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's wrap up part 1 here of Allie Marie Smith's story on the Hopecast. Everybody, Allie, where can people connect with you? Where can they find your content and learn more about you?
Sure. My personal website is my name, alliemariesmith.com. It's spelled ALLIE, mariesmith.com. And the website for our ministry that I direct is called Wonderfully Made, wonderfullymade.org. And it's also the same name as the book I wrote for young women and the women who love them.
That's awesome. Everybody, this is an amazing resource. And on next week's episode, we're going to get into Wonderfully Made and Allie's ministry to young women. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Hopecast. You can connect with me at rachelflick.com. Would you please rate, review, and subscribe to share the message of hope with more people? And if this episode touched you in any way, share it with a friend. Everybody, thank you so much. This is the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachelflick.com. While there, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Also, another great way to stay informed with the Hopecast is to follow Rachael on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Just click on the social media icons at the top of the page and you'll be directed to Rachael's social media sites. While you're online, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachelflick.com to book her today. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.